When evening in the Shire was grey, his footsteps on the hill were heard. Before the dawn, he went away on journey long without a word. From Wilderland to western shore, from northern waste to southern hill, through dragon lair and hidden door and darkling woods, he walked at will. With dwarf and hobbit, elves and men, with mortal and immortal folk, with bird on bough and beast in den, in their own secret tongues he spoke. A deadly sword, a healing hand, a back that bent beneath its load, a trumpet voice, a burning brand, a weary pilgrim on the road. A lord of wisdom throne he sat, swift in anger, quick to laugh. An old man in a battered hat who leaned upon a thorny staff. He stood upon the bridge alone, and fire and shadow both defied. His staff was broken on the stone, in Khazad-dûm his wisdom died. I am Gandalf, and Gandalf means me. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Aether Hub. I'm Simon, bringing you more Magic the Gathering lore. Today I want to cover something a little bit out of my expertise, as Magic the Gathering ventures to the lands of Middle-earth in this epic crossover set. It got me pondering, how do I even begin to cover a story like this? A story that hasn't been told by our game, but rather, MTG is merely a vessel by which an already beloved story can again be experienced. I want to start off by saying I'm a huge fan of Lord of the Rings. From reading the books when I was younger and falling in love with the movies, to even enjoying the Hobbit trilogy, if you can believe that. I love everything green and pleasant about the quaint and fantastical world of Middle-earth. And I'm confident that the tales of Middle-earth started my obsession with fantasy storytelling. Thus, how I eventually came to the Vorthos community of Magic the Gathering. So this crossover set isn't just a crossover between brands. To me, it's a crossover of passions. With that, I want to take this opportunity to bring the tales of Middle-earth to you, the fans of Magic the Gathering, while we have this bridge built between the two franchises, sharing the lore of Lord of the Rings as presented on the cards that you can play when this set releases to stores on June 23rd. Which brings me back to my initial question. How does one even begin to cover the Lord of the Rings lore when tying it to MTG? Well, I think the best place to start is with one of the greatest heroes of these stories. The wizard, Gandalf. Who is he, and what role did he play in Lord of the Rings? Remember, if you enjoy our content here at the Aether Hub, consider supporting us by leaving this video a like, sharing it with friends, and becoming a subscriber. It all goes a long way in helping us grow. Now, let's embark on an adventure. While at first glance, many would mistake Gandalf as nothing more than a kindly old man, a frail figure who stood tall and proud, but noticeably supported by a walking stick. However, this isn't quite the case. While Gandalf is old, he's actually much older than he appears, and he's certainly no mortal man. As a wizard of Middle-earth, Gandalf was once known by another name, Elorin. He was a Maiar. In Lord of the Rings, there are gods who oversaw the crafting of physical space and maintained power over the mortals who have since risen from their works. These gods are known as the Valar. The Valar created the Maiar to help them shape Middle-earth, give it purpose and direction. In essence, the Maiar, including Gandalf, acted as primordial spirits meant to be the working hands of the Valar. So while they weren't as powerful as the gods they served, this made the Maiar extremely influential on Middle-earth. While balance has always been the goal of the Valar, it wasn't always achievable, as even in their high ranks, darkness cast a wide shadow. Namely by the Valar of evil, Melkor, who had made the destruction of light his sole purpose in existence. The other Valar rose up to stop his betrayal, and only after losing many were they able to strike down this terrible foe. But just as Gandalf served a Valar of compassion and grief, Melkor too had Maiar that carried on his dark purpose. This spirit would eventually take the name Sauron. From this fallout, we have the start of the stories told in the mortal realms of Middle-earth, of the Dark Lord Sauron coming to the lands from the east, corrupting elves, dwarves, and men, crafting rings of power in the guise of gifts, and himself, the One Ring to control them all, spreading his dominance across the creations of the Valar. As the ages passed, the Valar sent some of their Maiar to Middle-earth to end the darkness and prevent its subsequent return. These spirits took the shapes of old, wise men, They were now known as the Istari, or Wizards. Gandalf was among this order of 5 wizards, traveling the lands in a tattered gray hooded cape with nothing but curiosity for the mortal races he encountered. In their order, Gandalf was known as the Grey. There was also Saruman the White, Radagast the Brown, and 2 unnamed wizards dressed in blue who ventured far east and never heard from again. With being Maiar, they could cast powerful spells. This is how they became known as wizards to the mortal races. Their purpose was always to bring the light to the peoples of Middle-earth and fight back against the darkness wherever they may find it. While others may have strayed, Gandalf stayed true, finding solace in a race most peculiar. In these troubled times, who would have imagined that a powerful Maiar such as Gandalf would see so much potential in the meek hobbit folk of the Shire? In the rolling green hills of the Shire lived the quiet and unassuming hobbits, a group of small-statured, large-footed humanoids who aren't much for adventures or trouble. Despite living in a world filled by conflict and war, the hobbits had maintained a peaceful existence. Such is this day Gandalf first encounters these parts, instantly falling in love with the kind nature of the halflings. As was his mission, Gandalf was set to stop the re-emergence of the Dark Lord Sauron at all costs. And hearing whispers of a rising evil spirit, known as the Necromancer, the wizard began making plans to limit the possible return of Sauron to Middle-earth. This would be the start of the Hobbit story, a prequel to the Lord of the Rings novels. Gandalf set to limit dark influences in the north after a powerful fire drake destroyed the dwarven kingdom of Erebor, plundering the mountains for its rich stores of gold and treasure. Surely a returning Sauron would use this tragedy to his advantage, so Gandalf felt compelled to act. He knew of a dwarven company led by the descendants of the dwarvish royalty who were looking to kill the dragon, Smaug, and reclaim the mountain. Gandalf knew, however, they would not succeed without his aid. He would lead their company, but only if they bring along a burglar of his choosing. This would be none other than the proper halfling, Bilbo Baggins. Bilbo was someone Gandalf had met sometime prior to this effort. As a young hobbit venturing far past the boundaries of the Shire, Bilbo seemed far more adventurous than his kin, all while maintaining a kind and compassionate heart. To Gandalf, Bilbo made the perfect addition to this company, though as an adult, Bilbo was much more like his fellow hobbits than he had been in his youth, and Gandalf had to go to some length to convince Bilbo to go out on this adventure. This would be a fated occurrence, as forces were moving without Gandalf's knowledge, and Bilbo would play a much larger role in the war against Sauron than the wizard could ever imagine. While Gandalf, the company of dwarves, and Bilbo managed to defeat Smaug, restoring the kingdom of Erebor and shutting the door to Sauron, the journey had changed the little halfling forever. It was on this adventure that Bilbo encountered the creature Gollum, deep in the cavernous and dark places of Middle-earth. In escaping this twisted creature, Bilbo made way with its precious, a simple gold band. This was the re-emergence of the One Ring, the dark artifact Sauron used to control and corrupt Middle-earth in ages past. While Gandalf was suspicious of the tricky hobbit with his new ring, a ring he suspected was magical in nature and perhaps a ring of power, he never for a second thought it could be the fabled lost One Ring. It was this ring that Sauron sought to gain true power in Middle-earth again, the one thing his servants scoured the lands for. It was now in the possession of a halfling in the rolling hills of the Shire. For years, the ring's true origins remained a mystery, even to Gandalf, as he continued to visit the hobbits of the Shire to celebrate in their good and honest natures. Darkness still lingered in Middle-earth, but so far, Sauron had not made many moves. Gandalf was content in his friendship with the hobbits, dazzling their youngsters with displays of magical fireworks, until again the Dark Lord cast his shadow over Middle-earth. The Dark Lord would not so easily be vanquished from these corruptible mortal lands, and his vessel to regain his true form now rests with an aging Bilbo Baggins, who had managed to keep it secret even from Gandalf. That was until his farewell birthday party, during which the tired hobbit would bid his neighbors and family farewell as he again travels. Gandalf had recently noticed changes in his old friend. He had become obsessed with this ring, which he now pledged to his nephew, Frodo Baggins. Gandalf even had to slightly intimidate the elder Bilbo just to ensure his obsession with the ring didn't consume his judgment. But this ring's true power would reveal itself to Gandalf when, as a prank, Bilbo put it on his finger during his farewell speech. In a blink, he was gone. Vanished. The One Ring had turned him invisible to the naked eye, a curious power for a simple gold band, one that piqued Gandalf's interests. As the ring now rests with Frodo Baggins, Gandalf does some independent research, looking into the origins of this ring and the creature Gollum who Bilbo had taken it from. In the records, everything started to match up, and Gandalf's worst fears were realized. This ring was the One Ring, the ring that would rule them all. But he wasn't the only Maiar to learn of this. Sauron, too, had found the location of his beloved lost ring, torturing the creature Gollum into revealing two words, Baggins and Shire. The minions of the Dark Lord now pursued Frodo. Gandalf set the young hobbit on another adventure, one of great importance. Carry the ring to the elvish kingdom of Rivendell, where its fate could be discussed. Gandalf dare not carry it himself, for its power would be too tempting for him. Nor could anyone else carry this artifact, for none could resist the urge to wear it and beckon Sauron back to Middle-earth. It must be the hobbit, who through sheer pleasant demeanor and need to not want, had some resistance to the ring. The travel was long and arduous. Frodo meets up with the lost descendant line of kings, Aragorn, as they make haste through the land. They encountered a number of threats, namely the Nazgul, the chief ring-bearers of Sauron, the wraiths of former human kings long since lost to the corrupting power of their Dark Lord. Gandalf at this time visited with his friend and fellow wizard, Saruman the White, the leader of the Istari. Though wise and the most powerful of their ranks, Saruman was more hardlined in their mission to shield Middle-earth from Sauron. He believed that strength was the only thing that could keep evil in check, and he would exercise this without hesitation, putting him at odds with the more compassionate Gandalf. It was revealed in this meeting that Saruman coveted the One Ring, at first trying to frame it as seizing power from Sauron. Gandalf saw in his eyes the same lust for personal power that had been the downfall of many mortals, and chose not to aid in this betrayal. Later, Saruman would admit that Sauron's rise was unstoppable, and that they should join the winning side again for more power. Of course, Gandalf declines, prompting a wizarding duel which saw him imprisoned by Saruman. Luckily, Gandalf years before had made friends with Gahir, the Wind Lord, greatest of the great eagles and children of the Valar. This is a species of very large birds that are somewhat sentient. Gandalf had saved the Lord of the Great Eagles from a poisoned arrow, earning a friend and powerful ally. The eagle flew over and sprung Gandalf from prison, but under no circumstance could he or any of his brethren fly anyone to Mordor ever, for reasons. Frodo and company survived the Nazgul, Gandalf survived Saruman's betrayal, and they all met back in Rivendell to discuss what would happen to the One Ring next, with this council eventually agreeing to destroy it, though the ring's properties prevented its destruction by more conventional means. It would need to travel to the dark lands of Mordor and be cast into the fires that bore it, the flames of Mount Doom. Only there could Middle-earth be freed of Sauron's influence for good. Tasked with this endeavor was a company of 9, dubbed the Fellowship of the Ring. Led by Gandalf, it included Frodo Baggins, Samwise Gamgee, Merry, Pippin, Boromir, Legolas, Gimli, and Aragorn. Together they would seek the light guided by Gandalf, but even a powerful wizard couldn't handle every trial this journey would throw at them. While traveling to Mordor, the Fellowship of the Ring would pass through the mountains of Moria, a dwarven kingdom deep within the Misty Mountains. The halls had grown quiet, as a darkness had already ruined the city. The dwarves here had dug too deeply and too greedily. They had awoken a dark figment of the past, what they called Durin's Bane, a dark creature of Melkor, a Balrog. Running from the other dark servants of Sauron, namely goblins and orcs, Gandalf would face down the Balrog on the bridge of Khazad-dûm. The hulking demon was formidable, but Gandalf fought with the flame of Aenor, the burning might of the Maiar, shouting, "You cannot pass." Yes, that's what he says in the novels, despite "you shall not pass" being a bit more iconic. The wizard shattered the bridge beneath their feet, sending the Balrog plummeting to the abyss, but the creature's fiery whip lashed up at Gandalf's feet, causing him to fall with his enemy. For 10 days, Gandalf and the Balrog fell and fought, through the depths of the mountain's heart, through fire and water, until their final clash was met atop a tall tower in the deepest pits. Gandalf cut low the Balrog, but collapsed from physical exhaustion. Maiar in physical form could still be felled, and this vessel's limits had been reached. Gandalf died. Though his spirit was not yet ready to return to the lands of Undying, the Valar still had use for their servant on Middle-earth. The rest of the Istari had either fallen to darkness or lost sight of their original purpose. Gandalf was all that remained, so his spirit was sent back, with more of his innate Maiar powers unlocked. Gandalf the Grey had become Gandalf the White, taking the mantle abandoned by Saruman's betrayal. Now Gandalf sets his eyes on the rest of Middle-earth and the war that was brewing. It would be a war to end the age, and he would do his duty in it. As he trusted the deliverance of the One Ring to a mere hobbit, Gandalf the White rode out on Shadowfax, the Lord of Horses, to shore up the lands of men to stand against the armies of Mordor. His mission was to strengthen the kingdom of Gondor, the one Aragorn was destined to one day return and lead into a new era. To do this, he had to ensure the surrounding kingdoms didn't fall to Sauron's corruption, starting with the people of Rohan. Orcs had pillaged their lands without much of a fight put up, which was strange for this once proud people. Gandalf went to investigate and gain their support. What he found was their king, Theoden, brought low, manipulated and made weak by Saruman's dutiful servant, Grima Wormtongue. This new advisor had cut through the proud man's resolve, leaving him unable to rise to the challenges brought by the orcs. Slowly, he ensured these lands would become Sauron's, until Gandalf arrived and cast out both Grima and Saruman's influence over Theoden. With the king's mind cleared, a new and powerful ally was added to the armies of the West. After this, the Ents, the old tree folk of Middle-earth, who had partnered with the hobbits Merry and Pippin, worked together to defeat Saruman's orcs at his Tower of Isengard. With this vital war machine of Sauron stopped, there seemed to be hope brewing among the forces of light. Gandalf later traveled there to find his former leader, Saruman, imprisoned in his own tower. Gandalf destroys Saruman's staff and casts him from the Istari Order, weakening his powers on Middle-earth tremendously. Saruman would no longer play a significant role in the war. Gandalf's mind didn't focus on this victory, however. More pressing concerns plagued his mind, as a giant host of orcs and others loyal to Sauron had begun their march on Gondor, striking at the final bastion against the forces of Mordor. The defense of its city, Minas Tirith, fell to Gandalf as its king, Denethor, had lost faith with the death of his son, Boromir, as well as succumbing to the faint whispers of Sauron. Unable to lead the defense, Gandalf steeled the hearts of their fighters as they prepared for a siege. The host of orcs and other foul creatures from Mordor were nearly countless, and with their giant ram, Grond, they shattered their way through the first of the city's defensive walls. Luckily, the shrewd strategies of Gandalf had finally laid bare, as a number of allies would join the fray and lift the siege, namely the Riders of Rohan, whose horses cleaved through the armies of orcs. Aragorn too would arrive with his own less conventional army, which would scour every last dark soul from the lands of Gondor. Even Gandalf himself found personal victory in fighting the Witch King of Angmar, the most powerful of the Nazgul and chief commander of Sauron's forces, dueling the Wraith to a standstill. Through their efforts, the day was won, but this was just the first of Sauron's attacks. There would be more as his forces continued to grow. There would be no lasting victory, save for one that Gandalf had planned for from hope alone since the discovery of the One Ring. For his bravery and keen insight, Gandalf was made leader of the armies of the West. He would lead them in the coming climactic battles against Sauron. Though they had achieved victory in Minas Tirith, Gandalf knew it was but a matter of time before the forces of Mordor would scour the lands again. They had but one chance at ultimate victory: Frodo Baggins. Through information gathered, Gandalf knew that his tiny ally had made it through to Mordor, but his direct location was still unknown. The wizard felt guided by the halfling's courage, and now realized their only chance lied with his bravery. All they could do was provide Frodo with the best possible chance at fulfilling his mission, casting the One Ring into the fires of Mount Doom. With that in mind, the final battle plans were drawn out. They, the remaining free people of the West, would gather at the Black Gates of Mordor and attack Sauron directly. It was a fight they could not and would not win, but to Sauron it would look like a final desperate plea. It was bait far too tempting for the Dark Lord to ignore, which was exactly the point. Gandalf would draw the gaze of Sauron's all-seeing eye to their battle at the gates, allowing Frodo to sneak past to Mount Doom. He had no idea if the plan would work, but again, had faith in the Hobbit and moved forward. Gandalf showed his devout faith in the halflings, as at the Black Gates, he was presented with what looks like evidence of Frodo's demise by the mouth of Sauron. Despite this, he, Aragorn, Legolas, Gimli, Merry and Pippin led the charge against Mordor, followed quickly by the free men of the West. Gandalf again called upon his friends, the Great Eagles, to aid them in this fight, a fight they knew they would lose. Despite that, they had succeeded in their goal to blind Sauron to Frodo's movements. With great effort and trouble, Frodo and his companion, Samwise Gamgee, managed to enter the mouth of the great Mount Doom and cast the One Ring into the fires below. Frodo almost losing his cool there. Well, he kinda did, and they did have to kill Gollum along with the ring, but the deed was done. Mount Doom exploded, the Eye of Sauron collapsed, Mordor crumbled to the depths below, and the dark forces that had festered the land scattered in cowardice. They had won, thanks to the keen planning and faith of Gandalf. With his mission complete, Gandalf was wrapping up his final deeds in Middle-earth. First and foremost, he had to ensure the safety of his hobbit friend, Frodo, who he had come to cherish and admire. Frodo survived his journey to Mount Doom, but was forever changed by it. Being struck by a Nazgul's blade and being corrupted by the ring's influence, Frodo had lost himself in this adventure. He no longer felt at peace in the Shire, feeling as if he didn't belong. Because of his great sacrifice to Middle-earth, Gandalf, the Maiar, and Valar would bestow to him an offer to venture to the lands of Undying, Gandalf's home. Before departing, Gandalf made good on his promise to usher in a new age after the defeat of Sauron. He was there to crown Aragorn as the new King of Gondor, bringing forth a new Age of Men. Knowing Middle-earth was now free of darkness and in strong, capable hands, he plotted his return home. Aboard his ship, sailing to Valinor, were some of the greatest and most deserving heroes of this age. Frodo and his uncle Bilbo were allowed passage for their immense bravery and key roles in ending Sauron. Together they crossed the sea, and Gandalf changed back into the primal spirit that had fueled his mortal vessel. He had succeeded where all the other Maiar had failed, standing as the only wizard to stay true to his purpose. He stirred the hearts of the people of Middle-earth to stand against evil, when falling to it was so much easier and tempting an offer. In truth, Gandalf was the greatest of the Valar servants, a special being of which none could compare. The victory of Middle-earth was in no uncertain terms his victory. And there you guys go, a Magic the Gathering player's guide to the history of Gandalf, the greatest wizards of Lord of the Rings. So when Tales of Middle-earth drops on June 23rd, if you pull a card featuring Gandalf, maybe you'll understand a bit more about his character and how important he was in the story of Lord of the Rings. At the very least, when you crack him in a pack, you'll have a nice little story to go along with that new card. Anyway guys, that's going to do it for today's video. I know it's a little bit out of my wheelhouse, but I hope you enjoyed learning this story from an MTG player's perspective. If you did, consider supporting the channel by leaving it a like, sharing it with friends, and becoming a subscriber. It all goes a long way in helping us build this community. As always, I want to thank you all so much for watching, and until next time, see ya!